Now, more of Illinois Rising, presented by the Illinois Policy Institute, the only show directly addressing the problems and solutions for Illinois. Now, from AM 560, here's Dan Proft.
Dan Proft back with John Tillman, President and CEO of the Illinois Policy Institute. John, and interesting events in the city of Chicago this week. FBI agents descended on a outgoing legislative inspector general. Now, that's not unusual to have the FBI descend on somebody leaving City Hall. Normally, it's to arrest them.
Right.
Not this time. Faisal Khan, who was the Chicago legislative inspector general, left the office, but the FBI had subpoenas for him when he left to take custody of his files and computers to protect the integrity of investigations that Khan was conducting on several Chicago city aldermen. Khan saw this as a positive development, a victory that somebody's continuing on his work, because kind of frustrated with the cooperation he got at City Hall investigating aldermen. Imagine that. Let's hear what Faisal Khan had to say.
They made that position perfectly clear years ago, Paris, that they were not going to renew me for this job. So they've had months and months and months to make sure that a replacement was up and running so this office could move over smoothly to a different operation. Yet here I am packing up my desk with no one here to give my material to. So I have to store all these files, these confidential files, to make sure that they don't fall into wrong hands. That's really the true motivation here that I think people should know, that council isn't upset about the fact that they need a new LIG, that they're just not going to find a new LIG.
And they say they could do that by December.
It took them 18 months to find me, to first get this office up and running. For them to find a replacement by December means that they would have to have a blue ribbon panel up and running, solicit resumes, interview people, get them in front of a committee, get them before a full council vote. And I'm telling you, that's just not going to happen.
I'll tell you what, at the local level, John, we have what we have at the national level, the most transparent administration in history.
The reason it's going to take so long to find his replacement is because there's so much paperwork that needs to be shredded and burned.
Yes,
and
right.
They need a fair amount of time to get that done.
Right.
So you got to get kind of busy.
You want somebody with a lot of experience in that, maybe former Enron executives.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and of course, this just goes to something we talked about earlier, is the attitude of the government elites versus the people. This gentleman was really supposed to be representing the people to ensure that transparency. They handcuffed him from the very beginning, and I think one of the things that came out is that something like 58% of Chicago aldermen, remember there's 50 aldermen, 58%, whatever that number is, actually were caught taking campaign contributions in violation of the law. Now, I'm a guy that doesn't believe in campaign limits, but if you have a law, perhaps these aldermen should abide by it. They don't abide by it, and then there's no consequence for it, so which is probably why 58% violated the law, because there's no consequence. And then the hall monitor that the students hired discovers all of this, and what do? They throw the school monitor or the hall monitor out of the school.
Well, the additional comedy of it all, tragic comedy it may be, but the aldermen violating the law are the ones who propose these laws, right. Because they want to don the cloak of good government reformers. And that, of course, means campaign finance reform, particularly for the left, and not a lot of free marketeers on the city council. Campaign finance reform, get the money out of politics, right? Run clean elections, transparent government. Right. And here's an example just on that, $282,000 in illegal campaign donations in 2013, according to Faisal Khan's office. And we'll see what the FBI does in terms of picking that ball up and running with it. I mean, I know for the better part of the last 40 years, we've averaged about pretty close to one Chicago alderman convicted on corruption charges per year. So maybe we pick up that
steady
pace
as she goes. Yeah. Dan, what do you think this says about the larger problem in Chicago politics, where if you look back at who ran against the mayor, not really a credible competitor anywhere, and no credible competitor rises from the reformist left, the Democrats, however you want to put it. Why is it so hard to find somebody to take on this corruption that is so obvious and transparent? Well, because it's embedded and there's a lot of stakeholders in it, right? So you've had this for 100 years. I mean, really, if you read Gus Russo's The Outfit, which is a great
history on Chicago politics. I highly recommend it, since the city's incorporation. And so you really have to dig deep to pull this culture up by its roots. Larry Bloom, remember Larry Bloom, the Hyde Park alderman? He was
the reformer.
Right.
Yes.
Larry Bloom, once he was arrested, charged, and convicted of corruption, it was famously said of Larry Bloom, in Chicago, even the reformers go to jail. and that's the commentary to this day. All of the promise of Rahm Emanuel, he is going to make the difficult decisions. You know, he's a business guy. He's not partisan. I don't know what Rahm Emanuel these people were talking about, but this is what was said upon his return to Chicago and run for mayor. And he's going to bring in professionals. It's going to be businesslike. We're not going to have these problems. Barbara Byrd Bennett, what Faisal Khan uncovered, his comptroller before Faisal Khan that was, on the lam in Pakistan before he got whistled back to face corruption charges stemming from his time in Ohio. It turns out the Emanuel administration, tiny dancer as I like to call him, not only hasn't lived up to any of the promises, not only are they just as an extension of the Daley era and the corruption for the last 100 years or plus in Chicago, they're also bad at what they do.
Do you think he stepped in and took the reins of the machine, or do you think he was subsumed by the machine?
That's a good question. I mean, it's a bit of a chicken and egg. I mean, the only thing I would say about that in terms of, he had good intentions and then just the culture is too thick. Rahm Emanuel is a product of the culture. Rahm Emanuel cut his teeth raising money for Richie Daley 2.5 decades ago. The idea that this was some new sheriff in town who, Gary Cooper at high noon, who was going to round up a posse and drive the bad guys out of the city, nonsense from the beginning. And it's just sad that so many, as I call them, tiny dancer Republicans, including in C-suites in Chicago, have bought this scam. They bought it in 2011 and they repurchased it in 2015.
Now, Dan, you're a Chicago resident.
I am.
And you've run for office
for now.
For now,
yeah.
You've run for office before. If you were ever to run for mayor, what would your, agenda be?
What would my agenda be? I don't know. We're gonna have to tease that for another show.
Another show, maybe a whole segment.